Phil Brown here with Fusion 360. Today we're going to go over how to utilize our soft jaw vise to speed up our manufacturing process. So my first step here is to get my vise opened up. You have a couple of options from here on how you move your vices around and what you do with it. One way is to open the original, go File, Save As, and then save that back to your project folder. Another way is you can always right click a folder and go ahead and copy. The reason you want to make a copy and not do a move command is because you still want to keep that original version in your templates folder for other parts. Another thing you could do here is you can actually bring in your customer supplied part. The nice thing is with our AnyCAD system, you can see how my part comes in automatically, and this is still actually linked back to my original customer part. So when my customer decides that they want to have rev changes out there, I could just get the latest and greatest, and everything's going to automatically update that I do from this point forward. So one other step here, as you guys can remember, we did make that spacing block when we designed our vise, and we're now going to utilize that to our advantage. So if I go ahead and make a joint, and we're going to do this joint is going to be from the bottom of our part. A nice thing is on that bottom surface of your part, you could actually push control again, and then you could move to the center point. In this case, that plus sign is the center point of that bottom surface. And then I can go ahead and flip back to my top view to my part and place that on center of that block. So now with those two components linked together, I can start to look at my block from other views. You're going to notice here, yes, my jaws don't touch, as well as my part is a little unrealistically low in these jaws and things of that nature. So let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of things here. One thing I want to do is let's recess this part 167th thou inside of our jaws. So close this out. We're going to get repositioned here, and I'm going to go into my parameters table. So again, when we built our parameter table, part D was our part depth. I can come in here and I can paste that if you were to click it, and you could put 167 deep. So as soon as I click off there, you're going to notice my part moves way up. So one thing here that's now looking a little unrealistic is why waste the material and use 3-inch tall jaws? Let's go to a 2-inch tall jaw. As well, 6-inch wide still seems very standard for my vise. Maybe we want to switch up how wide we're spaced. Again, we're not really making contact here, so let's step this down to roughly 3 inches. Well, in the case of 3 inches, we're starting to look a lot better at what we're doing, but we just have almost no material on this backside for this part. So the last step I'm going to go ahead and do is let's step this up to say 1.5 inch jaws. So 1.5 inch by 2 by 6-inch jaws seem to be perfect for what I'm trying to do at this moment. So now with that all being said, we can actually go through a couple steps here to cut those jaws. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and say let's do a combined. Let's pick my jaw. Notice how it says cut, and as well it's looking for a tool body. So let's go ahead and pick that actual part. If your part is not linked, before you hit OK, make sure you check mark keep tools, because in the event that you don't, what's going to happen is this tool body, aka my part here, is going to disappear. And you're going to regret that when you go to do the same thing again and do your next combined function to your backside jaw. Again, the order that you do these in doesn't matter, front jaw, back jaw. How in this case, your target body always needs to be the jaw, and your tool is going to be your part that you're utilizing. So now I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And if we actually take a look at this here, I'm going to turn off the actual clutch cover itself. And now you can see how I have an exact profile extruded down into my part. So a few things that you guys are probably questioning right now is how do we get rid of those features, or how do we make this a little easier to manufacture? Well, with our direct model editing, I can click one of those surfaces and hit delete. The same thing with my screw hole, I can hit delete, as well as this backside here, I can click it and hit delete. So now that I removed all those features, I tend to clean up everything on my vise. One other question you guys are probably looking at and wondering is if I open and close my vise linear in this direction, that part's not going to slide out of there very nicely. We have two ears that aren't necessarily put in a position that makes that doable. So you can always come in and modify this as you go. So a nice easy way to do that is to go in, go to your soft jaw here and activate it. And then we could start sketching on top of that. So I'm going to go ahead and create my sketch on top of that face. One thing you're going to notice depending on your settings is whether or not it actually sketches and projects that sketch. But now we can utilize that to our advantage. So one thing you could do is you can go ahead and hit your line command, and then in the case of this, I could actually put this more parallel, or I could create this to go down and out. So a couple of things I'm going to do here is put this point here. Let's use a couple constraints like tangent, for example. This line needs to be tangent to that arc. And then one other thing I want to do is let's actually put this guy parallel to this guy over here. So once you sketch out that feature or however you're doing it, the nice thing is with the parallel here is your part will slide straight out because you're tangent and set straight from there. I can come back and I can actually extrude that feature out. So again, is I can now do an extrude command. I can click that feature, I can click the bottom of my pocket, and then if I actually sit here and rotate down and take a look at this a little closer, you have that freedom to see what's going on there. Let me get this positioned a little better. So we're extruding off that side of that ear. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. You're going to notice that it cuts that body for me, and now that part should slide in and out. For time reasons, I'm not going to do the other side, but the process is still the same. Go find that jaw wherever it may be, activate it, and then create your sketching. The reason you want to activate it is so that your timeline constantly maintains what's going on to that actual body, as you can see here. So when I activate back at my top level, everything's going to come into my timeline from start to finish that I've been working on. So from here, you have the ability to go machine these guys out. Um, what I personally really like to do here at this point is I'm actually going to take that bottom spacing block and turn it off and then move to my manufacturing area. The reason you want to do that is one, you don't want extra things in your way that you're going to have to worry about crashing into or having any problems with. But and the other reasons is it's just nice for visual purposes. So from here, I can create my setup. I'm going to go ahead and pick my model body, which is going to be my block in the back. And then one thing I personally like to use is I'm going to go ahead and say the stock offset is 0. Given that this is 1.5x2 extrusion, the stock size isn't overly going to matter for what I'm doing. A few other steps that you could do at this point is you could actually add both of those bodies in, and then you could machine from there, as well as you notice where my orientation is. If you remember how I actually set up my orientation, I want to go off my model orientation, which in this case would be the top of that block that we designed. So again, is if you were to come down, touch the top of your part, then compensate down that negative 160, I can utilize this same offset for my jigs, as well as utilizing that for making my part in the end. So let's go ahead and hit OK here, and then I can go in and do some tool paths. So I'm going to use a 2D adaptive clearing to clear out this pocket. I'm going to click the bottom of the pocket as whole, and then if you want to, you could add stock contours. It's not necessarily needed because again, as you do have that open void between the part. Let's go get us an end mill, and then we'll utilize an end mill to do what we're doing here. So sampled library, and then we could go ahead and pull a 1/2 inch flat possibly and utilize that for what we're doing. So with that being said and defined, obviously you have your pocket selected, your heights are selected, you can change your step over, step downs, and anything of that nature. But the idea here is, again, is because you're adaptively clearing out that pocket. So I can actually repeat this function here, or I could actually edit it and pull that other pocket and hit OK. And now you can see how I'm clearing out both sides. So again, the nice thing is here's when we move on to the next step. Let's say we finished out our vice jaws and everything. I can go ahead and turn back on my part and create another setup. So again, is now if we were to go in and machine this part, it's nothing more than me creating my setup. And then this time, instead of my jaws, let's go ahead and pick my part. So again, this is up to you how much you get into this. Just remember that you also want to go to model origin and your model orientation is set the same. We did this all when we set up the vise to make life easy, but again, we're going to utilize that same exact point from when we machined our jaws as we're going to do for machining this part from the top down.